The wine glass shattered against the mahogany floor of my daughter Sarah's luxury penthouse. Her husband, Marcus, had knocked it over in his haste to leave the table, mumbling something about needing the bathroom. I watched the deep red liquids seep into the expensive carpet, much like how the truth was about to seep into our family dinner. My name is James Peterson, 65 years old, retired high school teacher, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I understood my family dynamics. Sarah, my only daughter, had become a successful tech entrepreneur, selling her startup for millions 3 years ago. I'd always been proud of her success, even if it meant seeing her less frequently as she climbed the corporate ladder. Dad, Sarah's voice trembled slightly. What do you mean, what gift? Marcus has been sending you $10,000 every month since we sold the company. It was supposed to be your retirement fund. I set down my fork, the perfectly cooked salmon suddenly losing its appeal. Sarah, I haven't received a single penny. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face, usually composed and confident, crumbled slightly. She reached for her phone with shaking hands, pulling up her banking app. That's impossible. I've seen the transfers myself. Marcus handles all our financial matters. He shows me the statements every month. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as realization began to dawn. In the distance, we could hear Marcus retching in the bathroom, or at least pretending to. I'd always had my doubts about Marcus. He'd appeared in Sarah's life 4 years ago, just as her company was gaining traction. Smooth-talking investment banker with perfectly tailored suits and stories about his wealthy clients. He'd swept Sarah off her feet, convinced her to let him handle the company's finances, and eventually their personal accounts after marriage. Looking back, there were signs, the way he'd dodge questions about investment returns, how he'd change the subject whenever I mentioned my modest pension. Even the way he'd insisted on handling all communication about financial matters between Sarah and me. The statements, Sarah muttered, frantically scrolling through her phone. He always showed me the transfers on his laptop. I never actually logged into the accounts myself. He said it was better to let him handle everything since he had the expertise. 3 years, 36 months of $10,000 each. That's $360,000 of my retirement money that had vanished into Marcus's pockets. Money that Sarah had intended for her father's comfortable retirement, gone to fund her husband's secret lifestyle. The bathroom door opened, and Marcus emerged, his face composed, but his collar damp with sweat. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed over the years. Sorry about that, he said, attempting a smile. Must have been something I ate. Where's my father's money, Marcus? Sarah's voice was quiet but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. I'd heard that tone before, in business meetings where she'd caught someone trying to deceive her. It was the voice that had helped her build a multi-million-dollar company. Marcus's smile faltered. Honey, what are you talking about? The monthly transfers to Dad. $10,000 every month for the past 3 years. Dad says he hasn't received any of it. Where is the money? I watched my son-in-law's face cycle through emotions. Surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, attempted indignation. There must be some mistake, he said, reaching for his phone. I can show you the transfer records. No. Sarah cut him off. Not your records. Not your laptop. I want to log into our accounts right now, from my phone. Marcus's face went pale again. Though the banking app is down for maintenance. Maybe we should discuss this tomorrow, when? The app works fine, Sarah said, holding up her phone. I'm looking at it right now. Give me the password, Marcus. I sat quietly, watching the scene unfold. Part of me wanted to leave, to let them sort out their marital problems privately. But another part, the part that had worked double shifts to put Sarah through college, that had sacrificed everything to give her a better life, wanted to see justice done. Sarah, honey, you're making a scene in front of your father. Marcus tried again, his voice taking on a patronizing tone I'd heard him use before when trying to dismiss Sarah's concerns about money. The password, Marcus. Now. He looked between us like a cornered animal searching for escape. Finally, his shoulders slumped. I can explain, he began, but Sarah had already started typing on her phone. The silence that followed was punctuated only by her sharp intake of breath as she scrolled through what I assumed were their financial records. The Caribbean trips, she whispered. The business meetings in Vegas. The new car you said was a bonus from work. She looked up at him, tears forming in her eyes. You've been stealing from us. Not just Dad's money, but investment opportunities. Marcus burst out. I was trying to double the money, make it grow faster. Some deals didn't pan out, but I was going to fix it. I just needed more time. Gambling, Sarah said flatly. You've been gambling with my father's retirement money. I stood up slowly, my teacher's instincts kicking in. In 30 years of breaking up classroom fights, I learned to recognize when a situation was about to turn volatile. How much? I asked quietly. How much is left? Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah answered for him, her voice shaking with rage. Nothing. The accounts are almost empty. He's lost everything. The next few minutes were chaos. Sarah screaming at Marcus, Marcus trying to explain about sure-thing investments and temporary setbacks. I watched my daughter's marriage implode in real time, all while the salmon got cold and the wine seeped deeper into the carpet. Finally, Sarah turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Daddy, I'm so sorry. I trusted him. I thought I was taking care of you. I pulled her into a hug, the way I used to when she was little and things went wrong. It's not your fault, sweetheart. I'll fix this, she promised, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I'll pay you back everything he stole. The money's not important, I said, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. The theft of my retirement fund would have serious consequences. But right now, my daughter needed her father more than I needed to focus on my financial loss. Marcus had taken advantage of our family's trust, but he'd done something far worse than steal money. He betrayed the faith my daughter had placed in him, using her love for me as a tool for his own greed. I said carefully, we should call the police. Marcus, who had been quietly edging toward the door, froze. No police, he said quickly. Look, I can fix this. Give me 6 months. I have some investments that are about to pay off. More lies, Sarah spat, pulling away from me. She picked up her phone again, but this time she wasn't checking bank accounts. She was dialing 911. As she reported the theft, I'd watched Marcus sink into a chair, his perfectly tailored suit suddenly looking like a costume, his confident facade crumbling to reveal the fraud beneath. I thought about the past 3 years, about how I continued working part-time at a local tutoring center because my pension wasn't quite enough. About how Marcus had always changed the subject when I mentioned possibly moving to a better apartment, all while he was spending my retirement fund on gambling and luxury trips. The police arrived quickly, one of the perks of living in an upscale building. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he kept looking back at Sarah, pleading with his eyes, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. She was already on the phone with her lawyer, her voice steady and determined. Later that night, after the police had taken statements, and Sarah's lawyer had begun the process of freezing accounts and tracking down missing funds, we sat together on her balcony. The city lights sparkled below us, a stark contrast to my modest apartment on the other side of town. I should have seen it, Sarah said, staring into her untouched glass of wine. There were so many signs. He was your husband, I replied. You trusted him. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. She turned to me, her eyes red but determined. I'm going to make this right, Dad. Every penny he stole, plus interest. And I'm never letting anyone else handle my finances again. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You don't have to do that. I've got my pension and the tutoring job. Yes, I do, she interrupted. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because that's what this family is about. We take care of each other. That's what Mom taught us before she died, remember? I nodded, feeling the familiar ache at the mention of my late wife. Sarah had her mother's determination, that same steel core beneath a gentle exterior. As we sat there, watching the city below, I realized that while Marcus had stolen my retirement fund, he hadn't stolen what mattered most, the bond between father and daughter, the trust that had weathered every storm life had thrown at us. The next few months would be challenging. There would be legal battles, financial investigations, and the painful process of rebuilding what was lost. But sitting there with Sarah, I knew we would face it together, just as we always had. The night wasn't quite over, though. There was still one more surprise waiting in the shadows of that expensive penthouse, one more revelation that would change everything we thought we knew about Marcus's scheme. The first signs that Marcus's deception ran deeper than we had imagined came 3 days after his arrest. I was sitting in Sarah's home office while she met with forensic accountants, trying to untangle the web of transfers and hidden accounts. "Dad," she called from her desk, her voice tight with confusion. "Can you come look at something?" I moved to stand behind her chair, looking at the laptop screen filled with spreadsheets and bank statements. At first glance, it was just numbers, but then I saw what had caught her attention. "The transfers didn't start 3 years ago," she said, pointing to a highlighted row. "They started 4 years ago, before we even sold the company, before I even met Marcus." I leaned closer, adjusting my reading glasses. She was right. The first transfer of $10,000 had been made 6 months before Marcus had entered our lives, supposedly from me to an offshore account. "That's impossible," I said. "How could he access your accounts before you met him?" Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up more documents. "He couldn't. Unless—" She stopped, her face draining of color. "Unless he specifically targeted me. Unless none of this was accidental." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just married Sarah and then taken advantage of the situation. He had planned this from the beginning, chosen her as a target while her company was still growing. "Call Detective Morrison," I said, referring to the lead investigator on the case. "This changes everything." The detective arrived within the hour, bringing with her a cybercrime specialist. As they examined the records, more disturbing patterns emerged. "Your husband," Detective Morrison said, though Sarah flinched at the word, "has done this before. The pattern matches 3 other cases in different states: successful female entrepreneurs, whirlwind romances, followed by systematic financial drain. He's a professional con man," the cybercrime specialist added, scrolling through data on his tablet. "He probably had help too. The level of financial manipulation here suggests a team, not just one person." Sarah sat heavily in her chair, looking shell-shocked. 4 years of my life. It was all a lie. I moved to put a hand on her shoulder, but she stood up abruptly. "No, I'm not playing the victim here. I'd want every account traced, every dollar found. And I want to know who helped him." The investigation expanded rapidly after that. The FBI got involved, linking Marcus's activities to a larger network of financial fraudsters. Names began to surface. Other victims, other accomplices, a whole shadow world of calculated deception. One name in particular stood out: Victoria Wells, Marcus's supposed ex-wife. When the police showed us her photo, Sarah gasped. "That's his sister. He told me that was his sister Emma, who lived in Seattle." "She's neither his sister nor in Seattle," Detective Morrison explained. "She's his partner, both romantically and criminally. They've been working together for at least a decade." The pieces started falling into place. Victoria/Emma had been the one who'd first mentioned Sarah's company to Marcus at a tech conference. She'd orchestrated their chance meeting, played the role of supportive sister during their courtship, and even helped plan their wedding. The long game, Detective Morrison called it. They invest years in building trust, creating a fictional life so complete that no one questions it. But they had made one crucial mistake. In their arrogance, they'd kept records, detailed files on every victim, every scheme, every dollar stolen. When the police raided Marcus's private office in a different city, another lie. He'd had claimed it was his company's satellite office. They found everything. You weren't just another target, Detective Morrison told Sarah, spreading photos across her desk. You were supposed to be their biggest score. They had detailed plans for the next 5 years, including how they would eventually take control of your entire company. Sarah picked up one of the photos, a surveillance shot of her leaving her office 2 years before she met Marcus. They were watching me all that time. I felt a cold anger building in my chest. These people hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen years of my daughter's life, played with her emotions, and planned to take everything she'd worked for. But Sarah wasn't broken. If anything, each new revelation seemed to strengthen her resolve. I want to help, she told Detective Morrison. Use me as bait. Victoria doesn't know we've discovered everything. Let me contact her. The detective started to object, but something in Sarah's expression made her pause. What did you have in mind? Over the next hour, Sarah outlined a plan so detailed, so strategic, that I was reminded again of why she'd succeeded in business. She hadn't just learned from this experience. She was going to turn it against the people who had tried to destroy her. Victoria thinks she's still in control, Sarah explained. She's been calling daily, playing the concerned sister, trying to find out what I know. Let's give her something to work with. The trap was set carefully over the next few days. Sarah, coached by the FBI, began dropping hints in her conversations with Victoria about hidden accounts Marcus had mentioned, about assets she couldn't quite locate. He told me about emergency funds, she said during one recorded call, her voice carefully modulated to sound desperate and confused. Something about accounts in the Caymans. I need to access them to pay his legal fees. Victoria, thinking she was manipulating a distraught wife, took the bait. She offered to help, to fly in and assist with locating the money. What she didn't know was that every word, every move, was being monitored. She'll try to access the real accounts, Sarah told me the night before Victoria was due to arrive. The ones where they'd hidden everyone's money. She can't resist a chance to clean everything out before disappearing. I watched my daughter, seeing not just the successful businesswoman she'd become, but the fighter she'd always been. You're sure about this? It could be dangerous. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile I was used to. This was the smile of someone who had been underestimated, someone ready to strike back. They thought I was just another rich girl they could manipulate, she said quietly. They forgot that I built my company by outsmarting bigger, more powerful competitors. Now it's their turn to learn what that feels like. The next 24 hours would prove just how right she was, and just how completely Marcus and Victoria had misjudged their chosen victim. But as we prepared for the final phase of the operation, none of us could have predicted just how far these criminals would go to protect their empire of lies. Victoria Wells arrived at Sarah's penthouse exactly on schedule, every inch the concerned sister-in-law. Her designer outfit and perfectly styled hair projected an image of wealthy sophistication. An image, we now knew, built entirely on stolen money. Sarah, darling, she air-kissed my daughter's cheeks, her eyes expertly glistening with fake tears. This whole situation is just horrible. I can't believe my brother would do this to you. I watched from the kitchen, playing the role of concerned father making coffee. FBI agents were positioned throughout the building, monitoring every word through carefully hidden microphones. I just don't understand the accounts, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. A performance that would have won her an Oscar. Marcus always handled everything. Now his lawyers are asking about offshore transfers, and I don't know what to do. Victoria set her expensive handbag on the couch, pulling out a laptop. Let me help you sort through this, dear. Marcus may have made mistakes, but we need to protect what's yours. What happened next was like watching a masterclass in confidence games from both sides. Victoria slowly, carefully tried to gain access to Sarah's accounts, using the pretext of organizing the finances. Meanwhile, Sarah played the perfect mark, appearing just confused enough to keep Victoria engaged while feeding her carefully prepared misinformation. I found some paperwork in Marcus's home office, Sarah mentioned casually, sliding a folder across the coffee table. Something about accounts in Singapore. The numbers are so large. Victoria's eyes flickered with barely concealed interest. These were the fake documents the FBI had prepared, showing massive transfers to accounts that were actually monitored traps. Oh, those must be from his investment group, Victoria said smoothly, taking the bait. I can help you access them. For your own protection, of course. For the next 2 hours, I watched my daughter lead Victoria through an intricate dance of partial revelations and strategic confusion. Each piece of information was a carefully laid breadcrumb, leading Victoria exactly where we wanted her to go. Then Victoria made her first mistake. I'll need to make some calls, she said, stepping onto the balcony with her phone. Thanks to the FBI's surveillance, we heard every word of her conversation with an unknown accomplice. The accounts are bigger than we thought. No, she doesn't suspect. Yes, I can clean them out tonight. Book the flight to Dubai for tomorrow morning. Sarah caught my eye and nodded slightly. Everything was going according to plan. Victoria wasn't just taking the bait, she was swallowing it whole. But then things took an unexpected turn. Victoria's next call wasn't to another accomplice, it was to Marcus in jail, and his response changed everything. Kill the old man, we heard Marcus say through the surveillance feed. Make it look like suicide. Once he's gone, she'll be too devastated to focus on the money. I felt a chill run down my spine. Sarah's face went pale, but she held her composure. This wasn't just fraud anymore. We were dealing with people willing to commit murder to protect their scheme. The FBI agents monitoring the situation immediately shifted protocols. What had been a financial sting was now a potential homicide prevention operation. Victoria ended her call and returned inside, her sympathetic smile never wavering. But now we could see the predator behind the mask, the calculating killer beneath the designer clothes. James, she turned to me, you look tired. Why don't I make you some fresh coffee? Sarah caught my eye. We both knew what Victoria was planning. The FBI had warned us they'd found traces of untraceable poisons in Victoria's possession during their investigation. Actually, I said, standing up, I should head home. Got an early tutoring session tomorrow. Victoria's smile tightened slightly. Oh, you must stay for dinner. I insist. Sarah, tell your father to stay. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. We were off script now, dealing with a cornered predator who had just revealed her true nature. That's when Sarah played her master stroke. Before dinner, she said casually, I should show you both something interesting. She opened her laptop, turning it so we could all see the screen. I've been doing some research into Marcus's past, and yours, Victoria. Or should I call you Vanessa? Or Patricia? You've hit so many names, it's hard to keep track. Victoria's composure cracked, just for a moment. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Sarah pressed a key, and the screen filled with police reports, surveillance photos, and financial records. Because I have files here showing your involvement in at least 12 other fraud cases. Different names, different cities, same pattern. Victoria's hand moved toward her bag, where we knew she carried a gun. But before she could reach it, the penthouse doors burst open. FBI agents flooded the room, weapons drawn. Victoria Wells. Agent Morrison's voice rang out, You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and about 24 other charges were still counting. As the agents handcuffed her, Victoria's sophisticated facade crumbled completely. She lunged at Sarah, spitting with rage. "You stupid bitch. Do you know how long we planned this? How perfect it was supposed to be?" Sarah stood her ground, looking down at the woman who had helped orchestrate 4 years of lies. "That was your mistake," she said quietly. "You thought I was just another rich girl who got lucky in business. You never bothered to learn how I built my company. I didn't get lucky. I got smart. Smart enough to spot predators like you and Marcus." As they led Victoria away, she turned for one last shot. "Marcus will never let you win. He's got money hidden where you'll never find it." Sarah smiled. "You mean the accounts in Dubai, Zurich, the Caymans? We found those 2 days ago. Every penny has been frozen. Game over, Victoria." The look of shock on Victoria's face was almost worth the 4 years of deception. Almost. After the FBI finished gathering evidence, after the statements were taken and the dust settled, Sarah and I sat on her balcony again, looking out at the city lights. "How did you know?" I asked. "When did you first suspect Marcus wasn't who he claimed to be?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Remember what Mom used to say? Trust your gut, but verify your facts. When you mentioned never receiving the transfers, something clicked. All those times, Marcus had acted strange about money, all the inconsistencies in his stories. I'd ignored my gut for too long." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Your mother would be proud of how you handled this." "I'm not done yet," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Tomorrow, I start working with the FBI to track down Marcus and Victoria's other victims. Some of them lost everything, their businesses, their homes, their life savings. I'm going to help them get it back." Looking at my daughter in that moment, I saw not just the successful businesswoman she'd become, but the fighter she'd always been. Marcus and Victoria had thought they were destroying her. Instead, they'd given her a new mission. But there was still one more chapter to this story, one final revelation that would come the next morning. Because while Victoria was being processed at FBI headquarters, she let slip a detail that would lead us to something even bigger than we imagined. Victoria's revelation came in the form of a single name she mentioned during processing: Alexander Pierce. To most people, it would have meant nothing, but to the FBI, it was the key that unlocked a global financial fraud network. Pierce, it turned out, wasn't just Marcus and Victoria's mentor. He was the architect of an international conspiracy that had defrauded hundreds of successful women entrepreneurs across 3 continents. The FBI had been hunting him for years without success. Sarah's case had inadvertently provided the breakthrough they needed. Within hours of Victoria's slip, international law enforcement agencies were moving on locations in Dubai, Singapore, and Geneva. The empire of lies was finally crumbling. I watched with pride as Sarah testified before a federal grand jury, laying out not just her own experience, but also helping to connect dots that investigators had missed. Her business acumen, combined with her newfound determination to fight financial fraud, made her an invaluable asset to the prosecution. Marcus, facing the weight of evidence against him, finally broke. In exchange for a slightly reduced sentence, he provided detailed information about Pierce's organization. The man who had so smoothly infiltrated our family was revealed as nothing more than a mid-level operator in a much larger criminal enterprise. "You know what the strangest part is, Dad?" Sarah said to me one evening, 6 months after Victoria's arrest. We were sitting in my new apartment, a comfortable place she'd helped me find after the dust settled. I actually feel grateful to them in a weird way. Grateful? I couldn't hide my surprise. She nodded, sipping her tea. They thought they were destroying me, but they gave me something instead. A purpose. A way to help others. She wasn't exaggerating. In the months since the arrests, Sarah had established the Survivors Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud rebuild their lives. She had used her business expertise and connections to create a support network that provided both practical assistance and emotional support to people who had been through similar experiences. The foundation's first success story was a woman named Diana Chen, who had lost her tech startup to one of Pierce's other operatives. With Sarah's help, she not only recovered her stolen assets, but rebuilt her company stronger than before. Diana became the first of many success stories. "You've turned something terrible into something wonderful," I told her, feeling that familiar surge of fatherly pride. "I learned that from you, Dad," she replied. "Remember when Mom died, and you turned your grief into those evening classes to help other single parents? You showed me that the best revenge against people who hurt you is to help others heal." The doorbell rang. It was Diana, arriving for our weekly dinner. These gatherings had become a tradition, a way for survivors to connect and support each other. Tonight was special, though. We had news to share. "Alexander Pierce was arrested in Monaco this morning," Sarah announced once we were all seated. "The last domino has fallen." The celebration that followed was more than just relief at Pierce's capture. It was a celebration of resilience, of turning victims into warriors, of finding strength in unity. As I looked around my dining table, I saw not broken people, but survivors who had rebuilt themselves stronger than before. Sarah wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was a beacon of hope for others who had faced similar betrayals. The money Marcus stole was eventually recovered, every penny of it. But the real wealth wasn't in the recovered funds. It was in the community of survivors who had found their voice and their strength through Sarah's foundation. That night, after everyone had gone home, Sarah lingered to help me clean up. "You know, Dad," she said, drying the last plate, "Marcus and Victoria thought they were writing my story. They thought they could define me by what they took from me, but they were wrong." "You wrote your own ending," I agreed. "No," she smiled. "I wrote a new beginning. For me, for the foundation, for everyone we help. And I'm just getting started." As I watched her drive away that evening, I thought about how life's worst moments can sometimes lead to its greatest purposes. Marcus and Victoria had tried to steal our future, but instead, they had inadvertently helped create a legacy of hope and healing that would far outlast their schemes. The money they'd stolen from my retirement fund was back where it belonged, but the real treasure was watching my daughter transform from a victim into a champion for others. Sometimes, the happy endings we get aren't the ones we expected. They are better. Sarah's story, our story, didn't end with the arrests or the recoveries. It continues in every person helped by the foundation, in every survivor who finds their strength, in every life rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. And that, perhaps, is the greatest revenge of all.